You think that they're easier compared to the middle schoolers of the past?
Dude, they're different. 10 years ago, nobody had phones. I'll walk in and half my kids will have the AirPod Pros in. Yeah, you're like, bro, how can you pay attention to God's word? What we do with the content is we're giving people the information, but we're not giving them the mission. That's a big problem with this generation. Actually,
welcome back to the Fight Fear City podcast. I have a guest today I haven't talked to in 5 years who actually played a pretty essential part in me growing in a very vulnerable and rapidly changing time of my life. And some of you local here will know him. He's been connected to Bethel Church for how many years, man?
So I've been there all my life.
All your life.
I was born in the baptistry. No, kidding. I know my family's gone there probably for like 55 years. Oh. So, and I've been there since I couldn't make a decision when I was born. So 36. So, man, isn't that crazy? And I work there now. So isn't that crazy?
Dude, wild.
Since I was 15.
Man. Well, for those of you who don't recognize him, it's James Helm. He's probably had just about almost every role you could have at Bethel Church at some point.
Yeah.
Other than lead pastor, probably.
They haven't given that to me yet. Which I don't know if I want that, right? That's
dude,
a lot.
Everybody's
looking at you. So.
But you fulfill, I mean, just about every function that could be done in the church. I think even when I knew you, you had like 3 titles associated with you.
Heck yeah, man. That's how it goes. So when you're working at a church, resources are tight. So you're like, what can you do? You do that? Like, it's funny. I owned a camera. I just bought a camera. And somebody found, and it's one of those cameras back, this is like 2011. So it's one that it has a lens that removes. They're like, you must know how. I just bought it for fun. And they're like, hey, you're in charge of pictures for the church. I was like, oh, cool. I thought it was cool. Little did I know. No, it's not. Dude. They're just like, hey, what more can you do?
Yeah, dude. Because what little you know, like those pictures end up everywhere. They're on Facebook. They're the profile picture.
Go back. Bethel Instagram. You're like, whoa, look at these old ones.
But they make up the website. I mean, it's really, I mean, as the photographer, you're like forming the identity of how the outside sees the church.
Oh, yeah, man. They're like, do better. No.
Dude.
No, they loved it. They're like, this is great.
So what all titles have you had at Bethel over the years?
Janitor. So no, we start with janitor. That's how I came in. So like, hey, you're gonna be picking up trash, cleaning bathrooms, all that stuff. And then I went into, let's see, I was a director of youth under Pastor Chris. So I jumped to that, and then they made me the high school pastor, the college pastor, graphic designer, middle school pastor, and now I'm back to middle school. So I just I took a little kind of, it's like a half break for a couple months. And I worked for the police for a couple months. But I still worked at the church, and now I'm back full time. And I think I'm kind of doing middle school and graphics / photography.
Perfect.
So they're like, hey, you can still do this. I was like, sure.
Do you think that time working for the police was just God preparing you to deal with modern day middle schoolers?
Yeah, man. Absolutely. They're like, hey, this is going to get a little bit tough. So we'll put you around people who can sometimes be difficult, even more difficult. And then you'll love it. I come back, I'm like, man, these middle schoolers are easy now. So we can do this all day.
Really? You think that they're easier compared to the middle schoolers of the past?
Man. Nowadays middle schoolers, dude, they're different.
You just hand them an iPad and they're good.
Yeah, right? They actually bring their phones in with them. So 10 years ago, nobody had phones, right? Well, youth. So the middle schoolers. And nowadays they all. It's funny. I'll walk in and half my kids will have the AirPod Pros in. Yeah, you're like, what are you doing, bro? You're a youth. Take the pros out. Or they'll take one out. So they'll still be like listening, I'm guessing. I never have really had that conversation. Like, are you listening to music while youth is going on? So, but yeah, like that's what you deal with now. Like they're just so digitally connected. Like they got a device going all the time. And you're like, bro, how can you pay attention to God's word? Like, I multitask, bro.
Dude.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, whatever.
No, multitasking maybe, but probably also like attention problems.
They're not multitasking. Are you kidding me? They can't concentrate for more than like 3 minutes nowadays. You're like, you are not multitasking. So, which is crazy. Isn't that crazy? Like, you and I could watch a TV show or watch a movie, and they can't even keep their attention on that. Like, they'll be doing multiple things, like on their phone, watching. Okay, cool. Back on the phone. Okay, back watching. Okay, now I'm texting. Now I'm on this. And you're like, bro, you changed tasks. Like, you've done 10 tasks in the last 2 minutes. And that's wild to me.
I can't
for
say
the next generation.
I can't say anything because that's exactly how I am.
Okay, you're
right
wired
now.
like a teenager.
Oh, dude,
you're like a middle schooler. That's great.
Well, I haven't always been that way, and that was the thing. Like,
So you rewired yourself.
I essentially kind of did.
Yeah.
Because I mean, just to me, especially like when a large part of your life is making digital content, and you're also doing it for multiple people, and then you also have a bunch of side projects going on. There's always something else that you think you could be doing. And honestly, one thing I'm even seeing with a lot of younger people now, as they come into adulthood, is that even taking time to rest, to watch a movie, a TV show, to do some of these other things, you actually begin to feel guilt from it because you're thinking there's so many other things I could be using.
Dude, that's crazy, right? So you get anxious.
You do.
Right? You're doing nothing, but you're anxious because your mind isn't in the that's a big problem with this generation. Actually, I got my iPad here, but like since the inception of being plugged in and on, because you're always in the hustle. Actually, what was that book? Everybody recommends it to me. Comer, he says, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, maybe not hustle, but hurry, right? So everybody's into this book because everybody's into this mode of we're hurrying, we're hustling. If I'm not hustling, somebody else is getting ahead and I'm falling behind, right? Isn't that the whole idea? So we can't rest. There is no time to rest. And you're like, that's crazy, because I'm like in a different spot. Maybe I'm not appropriate to run middle school anymore because I'm like pulling back from the digital. I'm like, I don't need a Facebook. All the kids are like, what's Facebook? You're like, are you a boomer? I don't need like an Instagram. What's TikTok? They'll show me the TikTok stuff. I'm like, cool, I'm moving on. But yeah, like I'm pulling back from that, and I'm like, I want to slow down because it's important in my spiritual journey, right? In my spiritual walk, because everybody's like running to like check things off, but you're never done. Nothing's ever complete. And how crazy is that to live like that, where you're like never feel like you can just sit and be at peace in the moment?
What do you think of a lot of other youth ministries that go the opposite approach and say, I mean, we're going all in. We're going to make tons of TikToks a day. We're making Instagram videos. Like, we're going all in to be with them. But also, I guess the turn of that is you're also making just a lot more content to give them an excuse to stay on it.
Or you're feeding the beast, right? I get it, right? That's good in ways, but then you can become a slave to that. Like, you miss you're producing content, but what's underneath the content? What's the purpose? Like, what's the end goal? Why are you doing this anyway? Are you actually helping to build up? I mean, ultimately our goal at Bethel and all churches should be raise up disciples, right? We're like, hey, how can we help you to follow Jesus in every aspect of your life? How to submit and surrender to Jesus in every aspect of your life. And sometimes the content production and the pressure of that gets in the way, right? Dude, think about this. So we've got 4 gospels, and those have a beginning and end. You can't add more content to that, right? But we're always looking to
we can talk about the book of Mark and
sure, right? But we can't add. The stories are there, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the content that God's given us, that we walk out, that's modeled for us. But there is no like sequel, or there is no more, even though like John will say, hey, Jesus did 1 million more miracles than this. And if we were to write about them, they'd fill what? Like every book in the world or something like that. But these particular things, this is the content that you have. This is the content that's modeled, but we're always like looking to produce more, right? Because we have this need for novelty. And we're like, we got to produce more. We always got to be thinking like what we have isn't good enough. So we've got to fix it or add to it or, all this stuff. And you're like, man, maybe not. Maybe that's not the route we should be going because we're creating content consumers, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't want to be a content. Like that's been the craziest thing.
But that's a lot of the makeup of the church nowadays, and has been, forever. Like people they come and they want to consume, they want to leave.
Yeah, I consume and I leave. But what happens when you just consume and you leave? Like what happens to a person? Yeah. Let's run this out. So you're just a consumer, or I'm just consuming. What happens if we just consume and that's it?
Mm-hmm. Like, then there's no growth. I've been entertained. I maybe walk away a little bit. I maybe walk away a little bit smarter at the end of the day, but I've not actually been moved to actually do something.
So I would think if we're not doing something with our consuming, right? Because if you go to McDonald's every day, you're consuming, right? But if you don't do anything, what happens to you as a person? You get spiritually. I'd say people get spiritually fat. Right? So you get spiritually out of shape because you're not doing anything with the energy you're getting. Because like if you were to say, James, what's your big focus in youth ministry? I'd say Ephesians. This is before you even asked me to come on the podcast, but I've been rethinking this because I came back from the police and I was like, what do youth need to be doing? Ephesians 2:10. So Ephesians 2:10, I'm going to just give you a paraphrase. It talks about we are God's, I hope it's Ephesians 2:10. You're like, great. 8 and 9 talk about how we get grace, right? It's a gift from God. And so then he jumps in and Paul says, hey, you're a masterpiece. You are God's masterpiece or workmanship, depending on the translation. And you were created in Christ Jesus to do good works that he prepared for you in advance. And I was like, man, there's two ideas here. There is identity and there is purpose, like work. So you have been given an identity and now that identity shapes what you do. And I think what we do with the content is we're giving people the information, but we're not giving them the mission. Yeah. Right. Here's the information. Cool. Now go home and get other information. Yeah. Whereas we've got to help students actually take that information and actually do something with it, right? Yeah. Take it beyond the wall. So just don't consume, because if you consume all day, you're going to get out of shape. But you got to actually work. So.
Well, I think the hard thing that people have thought through that, and then youth ministry, especially middle school age group, is we have a hard time feeding them information because they're at a point, they know some stuff, they don't really know enough to be mature in their faith walk. Like they've just had the talk like a year or two ago, right? It's
the
like,
talk. You're talking about the talk, like the birds and the bees talk?
Yes, I'm talking about that talk. I don't know how early they actually give it now, but.
Well, dude, so I actually teach this. I teach an abstinence class.
Okay.
Yeah, I go into middle schools and some elementary, and we talk about like sex and body changes and all that. Yeah. And like, it's getting younger.
Yeah. When I was in school, it was like 5th grade. They did that in Missouri in 2010. They still do it
in 5th grade.
Yeah.
But the importance of it, because here's what's more important. Since we have devices, the content that kids can get, the negative content, it's all there. Yeah. Right. And so you have to teach them younger because they're getting the information, like a morphed, broken, bad information, right, that an adult can access, but they can access that now because they have phones and devices. And so you have to start them younger. You have to like, hey, this is actually what this is all about. So
do you see middle schoolers nowadays versus like from your generation, do you feel like they're talking about that stuff more, or is it almost exclusively done in private, talking about it online?
Sex?
Yeah.
Well, middle schoolers talk to each other. Dude, they're like, bro, like they'll talk to each other all day. Now they have devices so they can talk beyond like school. They don't have to be on the phone. They can hide conversations. Like there's a story, Pastor Chris told me about this, but I was like, man, kids will figure out, right? They'll figure out ways to get around barriers that parents put up. And so there's a story with the Bible app, actually. So awesome.
Dude,
awesome,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. Because you're like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. So they would, a mom noticed her son was on the Bible app all the time. Now you'd think, wow, I've succeeded, right? My kid is reading the Bible more than your kid, 3 hours a day. And what it was you can make custom verses, right? So you can make custom verses from pictures. And I guess he was uploading nudes and sending them to people, but he like, maybe you have the verse of the day. So you're like, well, that's in the way. So make it tiny, put it in the corner. And that's how this person got around, like, how can I communicate with another person I like and send inappropriate stuff? And they did that.
Because no one's going to look through your Bible app.
No, you wouldn't even think of that. Like me, I would never. I was like, holy cow. Like they thought of that, but they said, hey, this has a messaging service. I can become friends with whomever, right? And it's a good program, right? Because it's a Bible app. I mean, how incredible is that? Like I can access so much good Bible content, and they had used it for evil.
Yeah.
You're like, whoa.
It's gotten so much more complicated. Like when I was a teenager and, all this was still going, you just had a second Instagram account. Like you just had a private Instagram account that your parents didn't know about. Because most parents weren't technologically literate enough to know you could switch accounts.
And then when I'm a teenager, you actually, do you remember AIM? Do you know what AIM is?
It's the messaging service, right? Like the chat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have that, but that's on like a desktop. Here's the thing. You asked, I think you said something like, what's the difference between millennials and Gen Z?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even Generation Alpha at this point. Like I'm Generation Z and I'm 26 years old.
You feel old?
I feel very old, honestly.
Yeah. So like millennials, we remember a time before all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I remember dial-up. I remember a time before people owned computers. I remember like the old console, like everything pre-internet where you're gaming. When you want to game with your buddies, they come over and it's split screen, right? Like GoldenEye, four-player Gold. You have no idea what that is, but
I know what
the
GoldenEye
older
is.
audience will know. They'll be like, yeah, GoldenEye, 4-player GoldenEye. How can we like go? Anyway, so I remember like digital. All right, I remember analog. Do you know what analog is?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It's that old screw-on thing in the back of my TV I don't use anymore.
You're like, hey, there's these plugs. It's not digital, right? Actually, some of that's coming back. That's what's crazy. Because Alpha, right? It's Gen Z, Alpha. They're getting so tired of digital. Like they want digital detox. They're going back to like analog stuff. Isn't that crazy? They're like, hey, they're getting old phones. It's kind of novelty for them too.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen too, like even, I guess like for me, like I have a vinyl record collection.
Yeah,
but
now
now
want to be vinyl.
But now there's people who are doing 8-track. There's people who are doing cassettes. There's people who actually now are choosing to have DVD collections and CD collections again.
Yeah, you're like, what? Right?
Yeah.
So, because I had a student, he'd walk around, he'd have a Walkman. I was like, maybe, he's got the old...
Disc or cassette?
He's got the Walkman cassette.
Oh,
yeah.
man.
So, well, there's that Guardians of the Galaxy movie, right? It came out. So that kind of brought it back. You can make your own. But I'm like, this is low fidelity. This is not high fidelity. You're not listening to it for the quality of the sound. You're doing it for like the nostalgia, the experience of
it's for the vibes.
Yeah,
it's for the vibes.
It really is. So Gen Alpha is like re-embracing analog, but they still have access to digital. That's the big difference. Because I was like, we moved away from analog because we wanted convenience. Now they're like, I have convenience, but I still want that option of nostalgia. Maybe that's a way to unplug. This is another crazy trend. I'm old to this. So I have a nephew. He's pretty techie. So he has like the 3D printer.
Oh, wow.
He has coding. He's making games. And he was explaining a game to me. And he's like, I'm making a game where you get rewarded for not being on your phone. So like the game plays itself. And for as long, so let's say you want to do like a level. You're like, okay, I'm going to do a 30-minute level. So if you can be off your phone for 30 minutes, you'll complete the level. And I'm like, wait, you're not even playing the game, right? It's over here. But that is the game. So they stay off their phone because they're like so plugged in. And that's different for me because I'm like, wow, they are. I'm from the generation where we were analog, now we're digital, and we remember both, and we can kind of like go back and forth.
Yeah.
Where they're only digital. They only know a time of touch screen and always connected. Actually, I got a baby. And I try not to have my phone out around her, but it's difficult. But she's starting, even at a young age, like locked in, like anything. touch it, like try to move things around. You're like, holy cow. Like I'll be changing her diaper. She'll see my watch. I'm like, oh no, screen time, probably poisoning her. But like, it's already locking her into like this kind of like way of doing things. So, Gen Alpha is very like plugged in, and they're trying to seek ways to get out.
Yeah.
Whereas millennials were jumping full in. They're like, I remember that time. Why would I want to go back to like, analog? Yeah.
Well, I try to think too, like when you're discipling a generation like that, and that really weird, unique coming of age time, what is even your goal as a pastor? Like where, like ideally, if you have a student come fresh in, doesn't know Jesus, what's your goal for that? What does that person look like by the time they're moving on from your middle school ministry?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. Because again, always like thinking this through, especially with vision casting and planning each year. Because one of those things within a church, you're kind of trying to build a structure, right? Because you're like, what do they need to know? What am I teaching? Is it relevant? But is it like good for their foundation? Will they be successful in high school? Because middle school, you'd mentioned it earlier, the talk, right? Yeah. It's kind of like their whole world is broken and then rebuilding. Because, when you're in elementary, you're doing everything your parent or guardian's doing. But then your brain shifts and you say, no more of that. And it breaks, but you don't know what to do now. So you're rebuilding it. And like, that's the time that's happening in middle school. And it definitely happens in high school because, you get cliques and, hey, which group do I belong to? Who am I? All this stuff. I'm not my parent. I'm not doing what they do. I want to be my own person. I'm going to push against them. Where are my friends? And so when you're thinking about like middle school vision and what we want them to do, I mean, ultimately, again, I'd come back to that Ephesians verse, but I also go back to the verse in John where he talks, hey, you're going to know my disciples by our love for each other. So love is the big thing, right? So, hey, Christ-centered love, but ultimately also doing. So don't just let it be a belief, but let it be an action. So I'm always looking at how can I connect this kind of a belief that's kind of hard to. I mean, they're developing abstract thought, but you're like, how do I connect this to where they're doing it on their own? Like everything in middle school is set up, everything in elementary school is set up for them. But how can I give them the tools to build? Right, to build their faith. So that just looks for tangible things. So how can we tangibly do things? How can you tangibly do something at your school? Here's one of the questions I've been asking in youth. I've been like, hey, what good have you done this week? So you'd be like, what good? So what might be the answers you might hear?
I shared a pencil with someone who didn't have one.
They don't even get to that. Like, they don't even understand that that's good. So they're so caught up with, I read my Bible. I'm like, well, yeah, that's good. So they're coming with the Bible answers, right?
So they're coming with cop-out answers all the time.
Oh, I came to church. I came to youth group. Or, I prayed. They don't say it with somebody, but they'll say prayed. And I'm like, man, that's really like, so those are the only things you see as good, right? So
they don't know how to connect the Christian church world to their everyday life, their categorization.
Yeah. So if it doesn't fall,
compartmentalizing.
Yes, they're compartmentalizing. And so if they don't know how to connect it, then they would, because I'm like, hey, I had a friend who needed help with their locker. It was stuck. And I helped him. Would you count that as good? Would that count as me being like Christ-like, like pausing with them? Because I might have been late if I'm helped. Like their locker's stuck. I could have been like, see you later, right? Yeah. Selfish. I've got to watch out for who? Me, right? That's the worldly thinking. Watch out for yourself. Or you could pause and say, you know what? It's worth running a minute or two late. I can explain it to the teacher. But even if I get punished for it, what does Peter say? Even if they punish you for doing something, it should be, wouldn't you rather have it for doing good?
Yeah.
And your friend would see that and they'd say, wow, you sacrificed being late and potentially getting what happens to students now that they're late. I don't know. It used to be like detention, but now it's like, it's not as bad as it used to be.
Right? You get like warnings.
A demerit or something. You're like, what's a demerit? All right. But yeah, so I'm like, do you see that little action as being a good action?
Yeah.
Because I want them to see all those actions. It doesn't have to be good. Like, they'll be like, I'll challenge them. Hey, what are you going to do this week? I'm going to feed somebody who's homeless. I'm like, no, you're not. Right? You're not going to go do that. First off, definitely don't do that alone. But the likelihood of that, they're looking for these big events.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, hey, look for the small everyday things.
So that's
right?
like your big thing is you need to bridge the gap between the church world and their everyday life.
Yeah, it's got to be tangible. You've got to connect your faith to the everyday thing. Otherwise, I think you're going to walk away from your faith.
And that's even a hard thing that adults have comprehending.
Oh yeah. Because we've raised it in such a way, like, I don't know if the church has done it on purpose or by accident, but we kind of have made it like this holy compartmentalized thing. When you're like, what is Jesus doing? Is he spending all day in the temple all the time or the synagogue? And you're like, well, he is there. Right? We see him there. We see him in the synagogues and the temples, but he's always there teaching and challenging the religious people to get out and do good. So I've been reading the Bible more, and one of the things that does stick out to me a lot is there is a connection of doing good. Right? It's always a challenge. Hey, do good, do good. Yes, you are saved by grace alone, but you're saved for good, like doing good works. That's what Jesus did as he's teaching. People would be better off after experiencing him, right?
Yeah.
Than if he hadn't shown up.
I think a lot of pastors struggle with that because they're so afraid of going the way of all you teach is good works that you forget the theology. But then there's guys that do the other thing where I think I see this especially like guys that become youth pastors because that's what they think the pathway is to being a lead pastor. Yeah. That's all that they do.
Right? I'm not aiming for it.
Well, I mean, that was the thought of a lot of, especially if you're in the small, mid-sized church culture. And so I've seen it so many times where you have guys who like, go teach the youth, go teach the kids. And they're just dumping everything they're learning in seminary on these kids. And these kids can't comprehend that.
Well, it's because they see it as a stepping stone, right? Yeah. You don't actually see your audience for who they are. You see the audience as a path. You're like, okay, I just got to get through. Because the average, I think, time for youth pastors is like 2 years. Yeah. And then they move on. They never see it as it's always a place that I happen to be at, but I don't care about. It's kind of like how people treat apartments, right? Yeah. Do you care about your apartment? Do you care about the people at the apartment complex? I mean, how many people got to know somebody at their apartment complex? Probably not very often. Yeah. And so that's kind of how youth departments are. It's like a stepping stone, and then I'll become the real pastor. That's where I want to really be so I can teach them. But you're like, man, what did Jesus say? If your faith isn't like a childlike faith, right? Mm-hmm. Then, because that's what it has to be. And so like, how well am I taking care of the next generation? Am I being present? Mm-hmm. That's another problem, right? Being present where God's placed you. Don't always like look down the road and be like, I can't wait to be there. How about just be here, and when God opens that door, then it'll be good.
Be faithful to what God's given to you in this season of your life.
But to go back to, so I'm thinking about Jesus, and he's doing good, right? And he's teaching. Those are never exclusive. Mm-hmm. It's never like he's just teaching. There's always like something that happens, right? He'll be teaching Sermon on the Mount. Why are people there in the first place? They're there to hear him, but they're also there to experience the good, like whether it's healing or food or whatever, right? So they're always like together. It goes back to that Ephesians verse, right? You're a masterpiece created in Christ Jesus to do good works, right? So God is doing the theology at work is the masterpiece, right? Mm-hmm. And implementing that is the good works. And so I think a lot of times we do get so caught up in, churches get caught up in one or the other, right? Yeah. So, hey, we do all these good works, but we forget about our identity in Christ. Or we remember our identity in Christ and we just go deep in that, but we forget we're supposed to be walking this out. Like, how many church people know their neighbor? Should you as a Christian know your neighbor? Yeah. Yeah, you're like, yeah, probably. So, I mean, that would be a good Christian thing to do is at least know you and know what's going on and how can I pray for you? Are you going through really hard stuff? Because if I can't even do that to my neighbor, then I think that's a big fail on the Christian part. Right? Yeah.
And I guess one thing, too, that I have a struggle that I've been probably thinking through the last year when it comes to youth ministry, and one of the big, kind of jarring questions that's come into my head is youth ministry even worth it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Well,
not just because I work at it.
My job, don't ruin my job, Jonah.
Yeah, don't take it away.
Yeah. I think my thing with it too, because I'm a product of youth ministry, but I also see myself as I was the rare exception that I never took a break from church.
Yeah.
I continued to go to church.
Yeah.
Throughout college, after I got married, all the way through. And that's not the path you see most people go out of youth group. You usually see, I hit 18, I go to college, I fall out of church.
Yeah.
And then usually something crazy has to happen in my life, or I'm stressed out enough by life that's what ends up bringing me back. And for guys, it's usually my wife went into crisis. She went back to church, and then eventually she dragged me there with her.
Yeah, so I think youth ministry, so it's a newer thing, right?
Relatively,
if you're talking about like, hey, how we focus, but I would say probably everything in the church it's more specialized. That's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So you have a elementary that's specialized. We didn't have that back in the day. Maybe like a time when the kids would come up and they'd have a little kids teaching, but even that was within this last 1900 century, right? But I think it is good that the one thing that I think is important to emphasize, right, is a lot of parents might just say, hey, we're going to send our kids to youth, but the kids never get to see what's happening in the regular service. Like, so they'll be like, okay, we're coming to 9:30. Kids go to service, we'll go to our service, and then we come back together, and that's it. Whereas I think it's not good enough. Yes, they're getting youth group to where they're meeting friends, common minds, certain things like that. I think that's really important to bring together that grouping so that they know they're not alone. Because if they just go to service, a lot of times it might be above their head. All right. And they don't get to really meet any youth that their age, because it's like, hey, they're over there, you're over there. And then when church ends, we leave, right? Especially if your church doesn't do like church picnics or something or meals. So the youth group is there because it gets students with common people, their mindset, right, together, learning at a level that's focused more on that middle school level. And then we actually, if they're learning there, we try to encourage them to either serve in the church, so be connected, especially so a middle schooler might help in elementary, which is good because they're helping to teach. They're a little bit further along. They feel like they got their responsibilities, so they can teach them. Or they go to the big service with their parents. So we might be like, hey, parents, instead of just going to church, go to a Sunday school class. Some churches call it Sunday school. We call it a blocks class. So go to a blocks class to learn, and then have community, and then go to church with your whole family. And so that helps, I think.
When it's not
bridge some of that.
When it's not just on the youth pastor, when there has to be a whole system of community that's surrounding them.
It gets so siloed, and you're like, that. Why do you think students walk away? Because it's siloed. They didn't know what church really was about. It's got to be multi-generational, right?
And then you see kids that get stuck in youth group and never want to move away from it because they've never gotten attached to anything else.
Well, that is the thing. They're like, dude, it was fun, and regular church is boring. And they give out candy, and regular church gives out bread and juice. And communion. Right. I always took a few. No, you're not supposed to do that. So there is that thing. Like, we watch cool videos, and regular church doesn't do that. And if you never expose them to that, they don't know what to expect, or they don't they don't know what to expect or how to integrate, or like, oh wow, how to grow. Like, we're not growing. We're not here to be consumers, right? We're not here to be entertained. We're not here for entertainment. That we're using some of those tools because they're relevant to middle schoolers. So we will use some of the cultural tools, but also we want to give them more liturgy, right? And you'll get that in big church versus youth group.
So how do you get ready to, let's just call it a handoff? Like, how do you get ready to hand off? Hey, I have this kid. He's getting done with 8th grade. He's starting 9th grade. How do we ease that transition into the next system?
All right, biggest thing, because middle school is such a identity defining time, you have to have people who know them and who can walk with them, who will be consistent. So one of the big things we try to do in youth, and I know other churches do this, is you try to have like small group leaders or mentors. Now, the mentorship cannot stop once 8th grade hits, and then the leaders say, see ya. So we actually emphasize, hey, carrying on. So you've got to have a connecting leader that knows them. So either they've already started getting involved, maybe they start seeing them around 8th grade year, they start doing stuff. That leader starts inviting them to maybe some freshman things, kind of get them early exposure. But they're known, and then that's the big thing. They have to be known, because that's where they fall off, is they come into a new environment, new people, new leaders, and they don't feel like they belong, and so they just stop coming. But if you're like, wait, we've exposed you to the environment, the youth pastor in high school knows you, and you've got leaders, and even better, if you have students who are further along, you say, hey, yeah, we're glad you're showing up, right? Because it's that belonging, it's a community. That's what's going to link them in. Because why did they fall out in the first place?
Yeah,
I have no community. My community fell apart. And that's probably the most important time for community, because they're trying to find identity.
Yeah. So not just relying on the community with them and the other kids, but actually, no, there needs to be an adult that walks that process across the border with them.
They're cognitively thinking, like middle schoolers aren't thinking about that yet. They kind of are aware of it, but they're still going to be selfish. They're still going to not go out of their comfort zone to welcome in other students. And that's where the leader, the mentor, is like the buffer, right? They bring the people along, and they're helping to connect the students, can keep them connected intentionally, because the students don't have the discipline yet, and at their age, students are still tempted to think, what's my reputation? How's this going to affect me? Street cred, like all that sort of thing. I'll talk to older students, and they're like, I can't waste my street cred. I'm trying to build street cred, and I can't waste it on that other person, right? Because they're worried about what are people going to think about me if I'm associating with this person? Yeah. And if I do it too much, then I won't be cool. Yeah. And that's crazy, right? So you have the youth leaders and the people kind of help and buffer that. And even older teens, because older teens get it. They're like, I'll be gone in a year. And I know it's more like, they just do. They're like, dude, it doesn't matter. Like, the thing you're worried about, the reputation or the groups or the cliques, those will fall away. You're not even going to talk to anybody in high school. Yeah. You're going to move off, and college is going to reshape you again. And so, having that, if that's not there, then it's tough to bridge the gap. Yeah.
And so what does the process look like? Because I can very easily see it, because I've lived through it, to be someone raised in church with a family and have a family that supported me in my faith walk. What's that look like for someone who's coming in and they don't have anybody with them? Like, their parents are not believers. They came to middle school ministry because a friend invited them. What does their journey look like to keep them involved in church in the hopes that they don't go through a break period like most do?
It's a little tougher, because if your family's not a unit in it, they're fighting that. Like, that's their culture. Your parents might not understand the importance of church, right? They're like, why are you doing that? And parents will push worldly things, right? Maybe it's like, hey, sports, that's the big thing. You got sports, so don't worry about that church event. And again, it just takes intentionality. It takes really consistency. Are we being consistent? Are we consistently showing up at the student's life, keeping them connected as best we can, and carrying them through? And ultimately giving them, helping them to realize that their faith story has power to change lives. So you're like, hey, you know what? Your parents aren't believers, but as you encounter Jesus and he changes your life, guess what? They're going to see that change. They're going to say, hey, what's the deal with that? It might not happen overnight, right? It might not happen like that, but they're going to see change and priority change. And don't stop inviting them. Be like, hey, you know what? Come with me to church. I want you to come with me to church. Or kids inviting their parents to those big moments. So instead of saying, hey, come to my basketball game, hey, come to my baptism, right? Yeah. And they're not going to miss that. Most parents will not miss like big events like that.
That happened to me one time, because when I was a kid, there was a kid who got baptized, didn't tell his parents he was doing it. Yeah. And they were very upset with the church when the church was like, we thought he told you.
Yeah. Definitely communicate with parents. And that'll start a conversation too, though, because there is going to be some friction. There always is going to be friction when you take the things of God and place them against the things of the world. At some point, there will be a breakdown, and you'll have to make a choice.
But the amount of times I've seen parents start coming to church because their kid went to church.
Oh, yeah.
And then became leaders in the church.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's huge because, I mean, parents' life revolves around their kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any kids?
I don't yet.
Okay.
No.
So when you do, your life, because mine is now, I've got an 8-month-old and she dictates everything, right? You're like, wow, I can't do anything. She's the most blessing ever. She's the most awesomest baby in the world. But your life revolves around it. Your attention's all on your awesome kid. And when they start getting interested in stuff, you'll notice this, right? If they're interested in a sport, the parents start to get interested in sport. All right, they'll get more involved. So when you're like, man, my kid is getting more involved in church, maybe I should check this thing out. Now, at first, parents might be like weirded out, like, church, that's weird, right? But if the kid is consistent, they're seeing life change, then they're like, maybe. And if the kid invites them in, I think that's important. Like, don't be like, I always try to encourage kids, like, look, your parents might not say yes the first time.
Yeah.
Right? And that's okay. But they will want consistency.
It's probably crazy for a parent, especially like when you have a middle schooler who's like, you're not cool, I don't want to go on vacation with you.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're like, I want to invite you into this part of my life that you're not.
Oh, yeah.
I would think that'd be like crazy eye-opening for a lot of parents.
Oh, yeah, man. It totally would. And that's where they will accept the invite. But again, it's different for each kid. They look at consistency. Well, this is the other thing. If I've got a youth kid coming in, I always challenge them to be consistent at youth and at home, because they might act like an angel, but when they go home, they're going back to their old environment, right? And in their old environment, they might fall into old habits. It's kind of like, I don't know if you know what Celebrate Recovery is, right?
Yeah, of course.
So when you have a recovery for a person, they say you need to change your friends, your things, and your places. And so sometimes when students go back to that, they might revert a little back to their old, acting, and the parents don't actually see the change. They just know, wow, you always go to this church thing, but you're no different, right? Yeah. So we have to reemphasize, hey, you need to be consistent, right? Yeah. You need to be consistent. And you got to give your parents a little grace, because they're not learning the same things you are, so they're not going to respond in the same way. But I think consistency is key, and then walking that out.
Gotcha. One of the critiques I often hear about youth ministry, and I've heard it even when I was going through youth ministry, is that especially in the American evangelical world, our youth ministry can be a bit over-sensationalized at points. One of the things that, I've heard, obviously, like, a lot of people think like it becomes a youth hangout. They see the games that you play to like just as icebreakers. But man, even like some of the messages that I remember hearing, like when I was in youth group, you're taking kids that are this is like the most vulnerable times of their lives. This is some of the hardest years of their lives, or at least I think it's some of the hardest years of their lives. But I mean, I've seen pastors sometimes twist and turn and even bring forth emotions and memories that may not even really exist for those kids, because it gets that big movement to the altar. But those same kids, they come back home, same environment, there's not really been a change. They had a moment, they've not really had a revitalization in their life. So I was kind of hoping you could speak to that, the good that comes with having fun and having deeply emotional time, but also, do you think that it goes too far sometimes? Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes, well, it depends on the focus of the church, right? So if the church is about, hey, we've got to have when the youth pastor or the pastor projects on what he or she thinks a congregation ought to do, right, then it can become manipulation. When it's like, hey, you've got to have your hands raised during worship. If you don't have your hands raised during worship, you must not be responding, right? Or, you know what, if I don't see this. So they might start, depending on what the pastor wants to see, programming towards that, right? You program towards what you want to see. And you're like, no, that's not, just because you see somebody raising their hands doesn't mean somebody who's not raising their hands isn't having a
deep moment with the Lord in worship
Yeah.
or something like that. Or just because they're not coming to the front doesn't mean they're not having a encounter with the Lord. So I think it does fall back on the youth pastors. Like, hey, are you projecting something you want to see, like you think success is? And that takes a moment where they have to be honest with themselves. So I don't always go for all those externals, right?
Yeah.
And I try not to manipulate. You're like, God, I want you to move. And we go from moments. We always have to think, what is going to take from this moment back to consistency. We really want, if there's one word today, it's all about being consistent. You're like, man, I want to consistently follow Jesus. I want to consistently follow Jesus.
This needs to be bigger than just a moment.
Yeah, it can't be a moment. I mean, think about how often we get the moments where we want to change our life, right?
Yeah.
We get inspired. Maybe we heard a podcast and the moment can get you moving, but it's not going to keep you moving all the time, right? You got to build into it habits. You're like, I got to build habits. And that can seem boring. So there is this kind of like movement away. Like, let's not be so sensationalized. Yeah. It's okay if church is boring. Some things you have to do it is just boring because it's discipline. Yeah. Actually, when we think about it, what the fruits of the Spirit, self-control, but also the Christian life is the disciplined life.
Yeah.
Right. It's not moving from one moment to the like one feely moment to the next. It's saying, hey, I'm consistent. And that's what I think culture needs to see, right?
Yeah.
Is not, hey, hype, but consistent discipline. And you're like, wow, like they're consistently showing up. They're not just showing up for the big stuff. They're showing up in the small stuff.
Yeah.
Because when you build that hype, it doesn't carry over to home.
Yeah. And I also think there's a conversation to be had too about being appropriate. Like you went to the same seminary I did. So, Dr. Lau, God bless him, he would give us a list in preaching of like, these are the words you should never say. I think Dr. Asa gave us one too.
Man, I need that list again.
but like, it's the basic things like don't say crap, don't say suck, obviously don't curse. Yeah. But also they always taught there was an appropriateness that there's just certain stories that might even be true to your life that you just don't need to tell. Yeah. There's certain places you don't need to go. Mm-hmm. And I think that can happen in youth ministry too. You want to seem relevant. Yes. You want to seem funny. But even there's the same guy, he did 2 sermons. He was very big in youth ministry, so I won't say his name. Yeah. But I mean, just would sold so many DVDs, so many conferences. There's 2 sermons I remember this particular guy doing. You'll probably know at least one of them. One of them was he brought a goat or a sheep, or a sheep on stage and had a knife. And he was preaching on the sacrifice that they were doing in the Old Testament and going through the details. Yeah. And as he's talking about it, that's when they bring in the sheep. And then he takes that knife and he starts petting the sheep and holding the knife in his hand and like pointing to like what he would do. And just as he's about to slit this thing's throat, he then throws it away and says, but we don't have to do that anymore because Jesus was the ultimate sacrifice. And like kids were crying because they thought he was about to kill these sheep. Same guy does a sermon, and he preached about this very openly, that he did a sermon one time at a youth conference where he claimed to be a prophet who could see into people's lives. Now, he knew this is not what he believed, but this is what he told the kids, that I'm a prophet and I can tell your sin. And he had a kid planted in the front row. And like, was his fake story, said, like, you've gotten your girlfriend pregnant and you've been selling drugs to spend this money. And the kid starts bawling and he runs out the back and all of the kids start running to the altar confessing. And then he says, no. It's like I actually can't, but God can. I don't disagree with the theology that he was teaching, but I'm just like,
his presentation was,
it's too over sensationalized for me that it's like, it's so wild. Yeah. And to me, it's funny, but also it borderlines on the manipulative for me, especially the second story. You know what I mean? Like those are the things I'm like, have we been pushing too far into that? Yeah.
You're looking more for what stands out, what's shock. Yeah. Right. Because, and everybody, like even youth groups kind of compete against that. They're like, what's that youth group doing? Oh, they're doing that. Well, then I need to take it up another level because again, I'm trying to get the crowd to do certain things I want them to do.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, no, that's not the objective. Or I'm trying to get more crowd in.
Or I'm just trying to get attention. Just the group that I have, I'm trying to wake them up.
Yeah. And so, there's definitely like appropriate things. I wouldn't do that in youth. Hopefully other youth groups don't do that. Like, that's crazy. I get that you're trying to be different.
Yeah.
It's like, man, sometimes in seeking, like, we always feel like we have to be original and different, right? Novelty.
Yeah.
And like, you don't need novelty. Again, you need consistency. At the end of the day, I'm willing to bet those kids remembered that. But
for the good and bad.
Yeah, you need to be consistent and be modeling, right? So that's another word, right? Modeling. Is the church modeling the message?
Yeah.
Because I'll hear a great message every time, like, wow, I heard that message from that pastor, great communicator. But now what's the modeling look like? Because if you can't connect it to the modeling, then it's just a moment. It just stays in the past. It's just a belief a kid had.
Yeah.
Maybe they walked away from faith and they remember. Like, they'll have good memories. A lot of students who walk away from faith have good memories of youth group, but it's just memories.
Do you feel like middle schoolers nowadays are always on fraud watch? Like, they're always looking for something to be fake?
They're like, you're fake, man. You're fake. Like, because they're being sold. It's constant, right? So they're always saying, hey, you're putting on an act. They are good at fraud because everything's a show. Like, literally, think about it. Like, I was thinking about this. I used to believe a lot on Instagram, right? I was like, oh my gosh, what are the chances? But then I was like, how is that camera there?
Yeah.
Like, what are the chances the camera's pointed at the exact spot where all this is happening? And they're like, that's fake. Or you get the influencers. Like, hey, this is one. I didn't know about this, right? Maybe you get an influencer, they have a Ferrari. And they're young. You're like, wow, they've made it. I'm like 36 and I'm not even close. And they're like 22 and they're supposed millionaire. I don't have no way to fact check it. But they're driving a Ferrari. And then you find out later they just rented that Ferrari. They don't own that Ferrari. They don't own that house.
Or it was their friend. It was their friend's dad's. Like, I did that one time in my friend's granddad's Corvette in the church parking lot.
You show up and you're like, cool, but it's not yours. You're trying to put on an image, right? A facade. And they're great at seeing the fake. And so I think that's what Gen Alpha probably is looking for most, is what's authentic. Actually, it's crazy now because we've seen AI.
Yeah.
And I will have people come up to me, show me AI videos. And I'm like, bro, that's like, they'll think it's legit. They're like, dude, that was crazy. You see what this guy did and this happened. You're like, dude, that's like fake. Like, how do you know? Well, I'm like, well, in the background, a person disappears into a wall. So that's a sign, but it is.
But it gets even like the older people that you think are so wise. And
definitely gets old people. They don't realize the capability of AI. But so they're just trusting because they haven't experienced it. Yeah. But these kids see it every day. Like, think about it. How often are they on their phone? They're just scrolling. And they're doing like 10-second scrolls, right? Because if you don't get their attention within actually probably 1 second, right? Is it less than that now? Like,
it's
less than a second. It's like the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
Because I've noticed that on my screen now, where on my scroll, where it'll show something from the video further in.
Yeah.
Like maybe the ending, but then it's only like a picture and that clips to the beginning.
Yeah. Facebook actually judges its reels by 3-second views.
Yeah.
So you have your views, but then you have, these are the people that held on for 3 seconds. To them, that's an engaged viewer.
And that's crazy, right? And so think about that. If they're on the phone for 3 hours, and break that down to 3 seconds.
Dude, I know.
Right? So you're like, they're seeing how many video clips, they're seeing so many things, they're hearing so many voices, right? Now it's crazy. Everybody wants to be an influencer.
Yeah.
Right. So,
my wife teaches first grade. When she was teaching third grade, almost all the kids wanted to be YouTubers. Yeah. That was their thing.
And nowadays, like, that's just how it is.
Yeah. Can I tell you a crazy story real quick?
Sure. I love crazy.
Bro, so I was watching videos the other day, and of course, my job is I'm on YouTube all the time. And I was watching a video of a guy
my job's on YouTube all day, right? Is that what you just
all day?
That's every kid's dream. You just said,
but I'm not in the foreground. I'm like in the background for how I make most of my money.
Okay,
but also, I mean, I think their idea of it is it's a lot like being a movie star.
Well, you want to be it's Mr. Beast.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be Mr. Beast.
I don't even think they want to be Mr. Beast because Mr. Beast is one of the hardest working humans on the planet to get where he was.
Sorry. No. They want to be Mr. Beast, what they see on TV.
Yeah.
Nobody wants the background, Mr. Beast.
I think they more of want to be, this is probably a bit old for a lot of kids. They want to be like my generation had like a Jake Paul. He's just to do videos, his crazy life every day and him just hanging out with the guys. And you just have.
But that's all set up.
It is. I mean,
but we don't realize that, right?
Yeah, no.
They don't realize that.
But now there's people who are cheating the system. So like I just watched a guy the other day. He said his goal was, I'm a professional YouTuber. I've built all these channels. Gotten billions of views. I'm going to take this dead channel that I bought. He bought a channel from someone that was monetized but had no viewers, and he turned it into making $1,000 a month in a few months. And he did that, and when they're like, "Well, how are you going to do it?" He goes, "Well, I'm just posting brain rot content of." Asking a question, and there's like this wheel that spins and yes or no. And it got insane amounts of views. And he also did this one with like a toy. And he's like, it's brain rot. I know it is. It's not good content, but kids watch it. It makes me money. Yeah. So, and that's the thing is you're getting more and more of that, of just people saying what's just going to get attention and keep kids' attention. There's not really a thought of, before was, how can I be informational? How can I be funny? Now it's like, what is going to get me the most views no matter what?
And it's terrible, right? And that's terrible. That's what's driving it. And now you got AI helping people. Well, AI slops everywhere.
Yeah, because it's easy content. There. It's very easy to do.
You just click, and at the end of the day, people want to make money.
Yeah.
So you're like, and it's hitting the next generation. And that's what's crazy is parents have to. They cannot let kids dictate things. Parents have to still parent, right? So you got like, hey, we got to put limits on this. We got to have the right focus. And that comes back to the church, right? Because they're like, well, what's the church's responsibility? And the fraud. So fraud alert or fraud radar, what'd you call it?
Yeah, fraud watch is what
fraud watch,
is what the children are calling it.
But that's what makes it even harder for pastors, because it used to be where pastor has to put on an image, right? For 2 or 3 hours a week, maybe on Sunday. Maybe I'm selling an image. But now access to that pastor, like they don't just want that, because they're like, well, pastor could be fraud. He's acting that way. He's dressing that way. He's trying to build an image. They don't want to see just, hey, the message. They want to see the modeling. And not the modeling, because again, we got to get away from just this is tough. So you'll go on like a mission trip, or you go on a thing and you're trying to get video of it, and kids don't like that. Because it's like, now it's fake. If you video it, now it's fake, because now you're trying to create a video and make an image and sell it, right? Say, hey, they just like, you got to be okay with, hey, we're going to go serve the community, and that's going to be modeling Jesus, and we're not going to take any videos or nothing. We're just going to do it for the experience in the moment. And that's actually a bigger thing, because now you're not creating the, even though it's real, it's still kind of fraud, because you're trying to put an image out there, right?
And that's interesting, because my youth pastor, amazing group of people, Brian and Dusty Brown, they were so open with their past before Jesus. They were even very open with the mistakes they would make in their life, because you have kids that are constantly doing reality checks on you. Does that mean that you can't reveal as much of yourself and your testimony to them?
I mean, I still think it's got to be appropriate, right? So some of my, testimony has got to be appropriate. So yeah, you can reveal some, but like, I'd be like, you know what, that's maybe, depending on my story, that's not appropriate for you to hear, right? So I always keep it appropriate, but it's good. I mean, people want to know, like, hey James, are you always happy all the time? You always seem happy. There's no way you're always happy, right? So I'd be like, well, yeah, I have difficult days, so I'll be real with them, but I won't overload them. Like, okay, now you're my therapist, kid, right? Because you're like, they're not your therapist, so don't like overwhelm them with all this information.
What's kind of the line that you draw then? Like the line Dr. Asa would always, tell us would be, people don't know Dr. Asa, he was one of our seminary professors, but he would always say, like, you don't have to tell the kids that you smoked weed one time. Like, because he would say, your intention might be, I understand where you're at, but instead, but it's more important that you set the model for what it is. So what's that balance then of figuring out what's appropriate, and then also what's going to take away from you being the model that you feel so important?
Yeah, because you don't want to give them permission to say that behavior is okay.
Yeah,
you know, we're not aiming for that, but you do want students to be like, hey, you're not alone. Have I seen or done things that are sinful? Absolutely. But that's not my mission, right? My mission now is to follow Jesus. Jesus kind of says, hey, drop everything you're doing and come follow me. Because I think sometimes our testimony can be baggage, right? Because we're always coming back to it, like it's our identity, right? You know, like Jesus has made you new. Let's keep going, right? Because sometimes I think we present it as like, hey, remember what I used to do? Yes. All right. But don't keep bringing it back to that old identity. Press on to that new identity. Because sometimes we can get stuck. Like the old identity, even though I have the new identity, I'm still leaning on that old identity. And you're like, no, I don't want that for students. So I'm always pushing to Jesus. I'm always like, Jesus is doing the work in your life. Jesus is the one changing you. So he's going to renew you from all these things. Is that sin? Yeah. You're called to leave that behind. Is that sin? Yeah. Have I sinned? Yeah. But I'm called to leave it behind every single day. Focus, focus, focus. Jesus is the focus. So I might not get into the nitty gritty details. I might bring it up, but I'm always pressing towards Christ, right? So what he wants to do, a masterpiece, right? Hey, I was trashy, but I don't keep that old. I don't know. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe you should keep that old trashy painting. I'm like, no. I don't care about that old trashy painting. I'm that new masterpiece. I want to focus on that new masterpiece and have God continue to do that in my work, right? And so, I don't know. I've always kind of focused on the new masterpiece. Yes, there was the ugly, there was the sin, but don't get so caught up in that old.
Yeah. So. But what happens when inevitably... It's not even, I think for sometimes middle school students growing up, it's not even the old, because they haven't really experienced what the old means like to us as adults. Because most of them are, I mean, just statistically, they're not going to listen to Pastor James' abstinence class. You know, they're going to fail into sexual sin. They will fall into some sort of, you know, they could fall into some sort of addiction. They're going to make horrible social mistakes. And they'll do all of that while still coming to church. So how do you teach? So what does that look like then? Those conversations of I believe that I'm saved. I believe I'm a saved person in middle school. I believe that the old was thrown away, but I'm experiencing a lot more sin now that's building, and it's covering up what I thought that masterpiece was. So how do you deal with that progression of sin as they get older, but still remind them that, no, you do have a new identity?
Yeah, I mean, well, they have to confront that sin, right? I can so I was having a conversation with a student yesterday, and it was just about cussing, right? So I never struggled with cussing, right? Never okay, I shouldn't say that. There was one moment in life when I was playing Call of Duty, and if I lost, a bad word might come out.
Just when you lost, man, you're a saint.
No, not when I won. Why would it come out when I won? That's, you know, so I might say like the F word or the S word. And I was like, man, that's not good. And I realized what was feeding that. Because you always have to help the student. You're like, hey, what's feeding that? What are you feeding? What are your inputs in life, right? So I had a student, we were having a conversation, and he's like, I don't cuss. My friends cuss. I don't cuss. And I was like, do you think they might think you cuss though? Maybe. And he's like, no, I don't think so. And then I asked him like, what's different about your life? Because everything else was the same. Like he's listened to the same bad music. He watched the same bad shows. And I was like, you're getting all the same inputs, right? You just don't technically cuss yet. And they are doing all this and they do cuss. I was like, they're probably going to assume they're not going to change their behavior because they're around you, right? Because you're taking in all the same stuff. Eventually, you probably will fall into cussing because you're taking in all the same inputs. It's not going to be the other way around where they become saints, right? They're just going to assume you're like them. You just happen to not cuss around them as much. They might even think you do cuss and they just forget, right? So I was like, your life is no different in any other regard with all your inputs except the cussing thing. And so I'm challenged that. So I'm like, do you think you're more likely to fall into sin or less likely because all that stuff? And you're like, maybe I should stop listening to that bad music.
Yeah.
Maybe my friends will be like, wow, why don't you listen to this anymore? Be like, well, I don't want to cuss.
Yeah.
So it's calling out the sin. It's like, don't set yourself up to sin.
And it's dealing with those environments as they come up.
Yeah. It's like, hey, well, it's getting them to think about it, right? Is this a threat to me and my faith? Is this a threat? Would this make me more godly or less godly? Because sometimes we just do things to do things. We don't actually cognitively think it through. Like, why did I do that? Why did I watch that show? Right? We don't think. And it's like, hey, I want you to think. Will this affect you? Like, will this make you a good person or a bad person? We don't even think about that. Like, we don't even think about that in the sense of morality. Like, does this show? Because isn't it crazy with all this new content? We just kind of take it in. We don't think about it.
Yeah.
Like, did those words actually affect me? Did watching that show actually affect me? And you're like, yeah, it desensitized you. You're not even aware of it. You can't even pick up on it anymore because you've been in the environment so much. So it's really treating them like, hey, be more aware. Is this the environment that's going to create you? Is this the content that's going to create you to be a man of God or a woman of God?
Yeah.
Or is this going to be the... Yeah, and then do you remove it yourself? And that takes discipline, right?
Yeah, this is way more than I think what people would think of, oh, we're teaching them about Jesus. This is like, no, we're actually aiding them to create mature people in a world that keeps us immature.
Yeah, and you've got to do that. I mean, it's got to start, you want to do it early, right? I mean, think about sports. Think about how they progress. So at first, when they're young, they're not very good at all. Right. And you're doing so much work, but usually around middle school, right? They start getting decent at their sport.
Yeah. You start seeing who's going to pull away.
Yeah. And they start doing the drills on their own. Like if you teach them a drill, if you take like a sixth grader with soccer and say, hey, if you do this, you'll get better. They start doing it, right? Because they're motivated and they're capable. The parent doesn't have to be out there to run the certain drills with them anymore. They can go out and be like, hey, can you run those drills? And then it starts to they get more disciplined over time. But I think in the church, we still very much spoon feed, right? We do it for them instead of like, hey, like I've got a baby right now. She's learning to eat. And I hate this because I want to do all the work because it gets messy if she does the work. Right? She'll get like miss her mouth, gets all over her face, and I have to clean her. I'm like, here, let me feed you. But I think we do that with middle schoolers and maybe even high schoolers where we spoon feed them so long. But guess what? By the time they're 18, they're adults. They're making all their decisions. And so they don't know how to do it because we've done it for them. And so you got to start being like, hey, challenging them to do the work of faith. Right? Hey, like, is your school better because you show up? Is your school like, and you're like, nope, I didn't do nothing good today. It goes back to that good work thing, right? Because I think if you can get them to doing good works, they'll connect it more to their faith, that tangibleness of what does faith really look like? What is it doing? But it's got to happen at least start by middle school. Because if you're getting down to high school, it's getting pretty tough. Because they're getting old. You've only got them for a couple more years. It's like starting a sport late in life, right? If you start later, you're going to have to do more to become like college level athlete. So same with like students of faith. If you're starting later, you're going to have to do more because by the time they get to be an adult, 18, they're going off on their own. Yeah. And if they're not equipped, then the world's going to tear them down.
And even if they fell away or even if they went away from church, they at least need to know where they can always come back to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a safe space. And church, unlike sports, it's a lifetime sport, right? It's a lifetime. It's like, hey, we're growing. We've never really made it. We're always striving. We're always disciplined. There's always a new season. Whereas, obviously with the sports analogy, at some point, the sport drops off, right?
Yeah,
you can't do it anymore.
At some point, we're done.
Yeah, but with faith, it's always progressing. It can always grow, and that's what's cool about faith is even if you didn't get in all the core stuff when you were in middle school or high school, and you did fall away, you come back, and we're still building you up. It's not like we abandon people, right? So actually, if anything, we're always coming back to the basics as Christians. You're like, man, how do I just love my neighbor as myself, right? How to just follow Jesus and put him first today. And I think that always comes back to the core basics. Yeah. It's not like you're like, super advanced. Now, some people do. They're like, do you know what might advanced be?
Advanced?
Yeah, advanced Christian.
Oh, that's a tough question. I think different people see it in different ways.
They do.
I think there's a section of people that see advanced Christian as you're a pastor at a church. Mm-hmm. There's also a section that's just like crazy Bible knowledge and acts holy and seems like they never sin.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to get at. I was like, we see the advance as when somebody be like, well, the Greek says this. And you're like, dude, that person is advanced, right? I think that when I have a congregant, and I've got some students who are super advanced, at least Bible knowledge, right? They'll tell me like the Greek and the Hebrew and the Latin. I'm like, wow. They're like, I know Latin. I'm like, I don't know Latin. That's incredible. You keep it up. But they'll like, no, they'll like name church history stuff. I'm like, wow. Most Christians aren't even aware of church history at all. They just think Jesus and now.